The crystalline ships appeared on a quiet Tuesday morning, their prismatic hulls refracting sunlight across the skies of every major city on Earth. The global defense networks had spotted them 3 days earlier, passing Jupiter's orbit with impossible grace. Now they hung in perfect formation, a silent declaration that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. General Sarah Chen stood at the window of the United Earth Defense Command Center, watching the nearest vessel shimmer against the backdrop of dawn. 25 years in the military hadn't prepared her for this moment. No one could have prepared for this. They're requesting landing clearance, Lieutenant Rodriguez announced from his station, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. Their transmission indicates they want to land at our primary facility. Granted, Chen ordered, straightening her uniform. Alert the diplomatic team. Let's show them humanity knows how to welcome guests. The landing zone had been prepared days in advance. A massive clearing reinforced with advanced composite materials, surrounded by a mix of diplomatic personnel and carefully concealed security forces. Chen watched through tactical feeds as the smallest of the alien vessels, still larger than any human aircraft, descended with liquid smoothness. The ship's hull rippled like water as a doorway simply appeared, revealing the first glimpse of their visitors. The Astrians, as they called themselves, moved with an almost feline grace. Admiral Kira led their delegation, her 4 eyes capturing every detail of the human welcoming party. Her silver-scaled skin caught the morning light, creating patterns that seemed to dance as she moved. Everything proceeded according to diplomatic protocol until they reached the military technology exchange portion of the meeting. It was standard procedure, both sides sharing basic information about defensive capabilities to prevent any unfortunate misunderstandings. The first sign of trouble came when General Chen presented the standard-issue United Earth Defense Force rifle. Admiral Kira's translator produced what could only be described as a musical laugh. "How curious," the alien diplomat said, 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "You still use chemical propellants and physical projectiles. We expected more advancement from a species capable of detecting our approach." Chen maintained her professional composure, even as she noticed several of the Astrian technical advisors exchanging what appeared to be amused glances. "Our weapons have proven reliable and effective for our defense needs," she responded diplomatically. Admiral Kira lifted the rifle with surprising ease, examining it with an expression that reminded Chen of a museum curator studying a particularly primitive artifact. "Fascinating. You see, we abandoned such methods centuries ago. Our weapons harness the fundamental forces of the universe itself." As if to demonstrate, she gestured to one of her escorts. The Austrian officer raised his arm, and his sleeve rippled, transforming into what appeared to be a weapon composed of pure light. With a gentle motion, he fired at a demonstration target. The beam turned the reinforced metal plate into vapor, leaving a perfectly circular hole. "Impressive," Chen acknowledged, noting how the weapons seemed to be part of their very clothing. "Would you care to demonstrate your defensive capabilities as well?" Admiral Kira's skin patterns shifted in what Chen was beginning to recognize as their equivalent of a smile. Another gesture, and a shimmering field of energy enveloped her. "Our personal shields can deflect any energy attack. They render weapons obsolete." Chen caught Lieutenant Rodriguez's slight frown as he studied the shield's shimmer. She had worked with him long enough to know that look. He had noticed something significant, but now wasn't the time to ask. "Perhaps," Chen suggested carefully, "we could arrange a more comprehensive demonstration of our respective technologies, a friendly exchange of capabilities." Admiral Kira's patterns shifted again, this time with what seemed to be genuine amusement. "If you wish, though I fear it may be somewhat one-sided." As the meeting concluded and the aliens returned to their ship, Chen watched them go with measured thoughtfulness. In all her years of service, she had learned one vital lesson. Those who underestimate their opponents often learn their mistake far too late. The Australian outback stretched endlessly under the morning sun, its red earth now dotted with gleaming structures erected for the weapons demonstration. 3 days had passed since the initial meeting, and General Chen watched as crews made final adjustments to the testing ranges. The Austrians have confirmed their arrival in 30 minutes, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, handing her a tablet displaying the final safety protocols. They're bringing their entire technical advisory team. Chen nodded, scanning the document. The demonstration grounds had been carefully designed. Multiple ranges for different weapon types, environmental testing chambers, and enough space to safely test everything from small arms to heavy artillery. Most importantly, every inch was covered by sensors that would record each test in precise detail. "How's our team doing?" she asked, though she could already see them preparing their equipment with practiced precision. "Ready and focused, ma'am." Sergeant Torres has the small arms team prepared for the first demonstration. Master Sergeant Wu's artillery crew is setting up on the far range, and Colonel Bradley's special weapons team is standing by. The distinctive hum of Austrian engines drew their attention skyward. Their transport descended like a falling star, its crystalline surface casting rainbow patterns across the testing ground. As before, Admiral Kira led her team with fluid grace, though this time they brought an impressive array of equipment. "General Chen," the Admiral greeted, her skin patterns shifting in what Chen now recognized as pleased anticipation. "We have brought some of our finest defensive and offensive systems. I trust this facility will be adequate for a proper demonstration." "We believe it will serve," Chen replied diplomatically. "Shall we begin with personal defense systems and small arms?" The first hour proceeded exactly as the Austrians expected. They demonstrated their energy weapons with elegant precision, their beams carving through reinforced targets with surgical accuracy. Their personal shields shimmered beautifully as they deflected their own weapon tests, creating spectacular displays of redirected energy. Then came humanity's turn. "A simple demonstration," Sergeant Torres announced, stepping forward with a standard-issue rifle. "This is our basic infantry weapon, nothing exotic, just a refined version of proven technology." Admiral Kira's technical team watched with what seemed like professional courtesy, though their posture suggested they were merely humoring the humans. One of their younger members even had their data recorder half-lowered, apparently not expecting anything worth documenting. The first shot changed everything. The crack of the rifle was sharp and clean in the desert air. The Austrian shield, still shimmering with the same elegant energy field that had deflected their advanced weapons, rippled strangely at the point of impact. Behind it, the target showed a clear hole. The round had passed through the shield, as if it barely existed. Silence fell across the testing ground. Admiral Kira's four eyes blinked rapidly, her skin patterns shifting through colors Chen hadn't seen before. "That's impossible," one of the Austrian technicians muttered, their translator struggling to convey their confusion. "The shield is rated to stop particles moving at significantly higher velocities." "Energy particles, yes," Lieutenant Rodriguez spoke up, his voice carrying the calm confidence of someone who had solved a complex puzzle. "But our rounds aren't energy. They're mass. Your shields are optimized for energy deflection, but they barely interact with solid matter." Admiral Kira moved closer to the target, examining the clean hole with newfound interest. "You've maintained this technology, not because you couldn't develop energy weapons, but because it works," Chen finished. "Sometimes the oldest solutions are the best ones. Shall we continue? We have several other demonstrations prepared." The Admiral's skin shifted to a deep, thoughtful hue. "Please do, General. I believe we have much more to learn here than we anticipated." As they prepared for the next demonstration, Chen caught a glimpse of the young Austrian technician who had been so dismissive earlier. They now had 3 data recorders running simultaneously, capturing every detail of the human weapons with intense focus. Lieutenant Maria Santos couldn't stop staring at the equations taking shape on her tablet. As both a physicist and military officer, she had spent the last hour documenting every ripple and fluctuation in the Austrian shields during their demonstrations. Something about their behavior nagged at her scientific instincts. "General Chen," she called out during a brief break between demonstrations, I need to show you something." Chen made her way over to the monitoring station, where Santos had set up her equipment. The lieutenant's background in theoretical physics had seemed an odd fit for a weapons demonstration, but Chen was beginning to understand why her advisors had insisted on her presence. "Look at these readings," Santos explained, pulling up several wavelength analyses. "Their shield technology is incredible, but it's also incredibly specialized. They've mastered electromagnetic and quantum interactions to near perfection. But..." She paused as a gust of wind swept across the testing ground, carrying a cloud of red desert dust. The particles passed through the activated Astrian shields with no resistance, leaving tiny trails of disruption in the energy field. "But they've overlooked the basics," Chen finished, watching the dust settle on the supposedly impenetrable barrier. "Exactly." Santos pulled up a simulation she'd been working on. "Their entire defensive philosophy is built around energy deflection. They can stop plasma, lasers, particle beams, anything with an electromagnetic or quantum signature. But simple kinetic energy, mass times velocity, they'd barely account for it." Admiral Kiura approached their station, her skin patterns showing curiosity at their intense discussion. "Is there a concern with the demonstrations?" Chen exchanged a glance with Santos before responding. "Not a concern, Admiral. We're just discussing some interesting observations about the underlying principles of our different technologies." Lieutenant Santos has been analyzing the performance characteristics. Chen continued, allowing a hint of professional pride to enter her voice. Her background in physics gives her a unique perspective. The Admiral's patterns shifted to what they had learned was their equivalent of raised eyebrows. "You have a scientist operating military equipment." "I'm both," Santos explained, her enthusiasm for the subject overtaking any diplomatic hesitation. "My doctoral work was in particle physics before I joined the military. The intersection of theoretical science and practical application has always fascinated me." She brought up another display, this one showing the shield interactions in slow motion. "Your technology harnesses fundamental forces in ways we're just beginning to understand. But there's an elegant simplicity in some of our solutions that might interest you." Admiral Kiura leaned forward, all four eyes focusing on the display. "Explain." "Your shields create a quantum field that repels energy almost perfectly," Santos began, highlighting specific data points. "But they treat physical matter almost like an afterthought. Our projectile weapons don't try to overcome your defenses. They simply pass through the gaps in your quantum matrix." The Admiral's skin rippled with what might have been surprise. "You determined this from a single demonstration?" "The principles were there to see," Santos replied. "In physics, sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective. Your civilization mastered energy manipulation, while ours focused on perfecting kinetic delivery systems. Different paths to solving the same problems." Chen watched the exchange with carefully concealed satisfaction. This was what she had hoped for, not just a demonstration of capabilities, but a genuine exchange of understanding. The Astrians had arrived expecting to teach. Now they were beginning to learn. "Perhaps," Admiral Kiura said slowly, her patterns showing deep thought, "we should review our defensive protocols. Would you be willing to share more of your analysis, Lieutenant?" "Of course," Santos replied, already pulling up more data. "Though you might want to see our next demonstration first. It should help illustrate these principles in action." As they prepared for the next phase, Chen noticed the Admiral's technical team huddled around their own instruments, suddenly far more interested in the primitive human weapons than they had been an hour ago. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the testing range as Surgeon Torres stepped forward with his demonstration team. Behind him, an array of targets had been set up at varying distances, each protected by a different configuration of Astrian shields. "For this demonstration," he announced, his voice carrying across the now silent range, "we'll show the practical applications of what Lieutenant Santos explained earlier." The Astrian technical team had repositioned their monitoring equipment, their earlier dismissive attitudes replaced by intense focus. Admiral Kiura stood with General Chen, her skin patterns shifting between colors that suggested both skepticism and curiosity. First, Torres continued, a standard combat loadout. He lifted a sleek rifle that, despite its modern materials, would have been recognizable to soldiers from a century ago. No energy cells, no exotic materials, just refined engineering and basic physics. The first target stood at 100 meters, protected by the same shield configuration that had easily deflected the Astrians' energy weapons. Torres took his stance, and the crack of the rifle echoed across the range. The shield rippled, but the round passed through, striking the target dead center. "Impossible," one of the Astrian technicians muttered, rushing to check their readings. "The kinetic energy should have been." "Should have been what?" Lieutenant Santos asked, approaching their station. "Your shields are designed to interact with energy weapons. Our rounds don't give them anything to grip." Torres continued his demonstration, each shot finding its mark through increasingly complex shield arrangements. The Astrians' data collectors worked frantically, trying to understand how their supposedly superior technology was being defeated by what they had dismissed as primitive projectiles. "But this is just the beginning," Torres said, signaling to his team. They'd brought forward several cases, opening them to reveal an array of specialized ammunition. "We've learned to adapt our simple principles to complex situations." He loaded a new magazine. "Armor-piercing rounds," he explained, firing at a heavily shielded target. The round not only penetrated the shield but punched through the reinforced material behind it. Tungsten carbide core, specialized geometry. No energy signature for your shields to detect. Admiral Kyra's patterns had shifted to a deep, thoughtful hue. "Your weapons are more sophisticated than they appear." "That's humanity for you," General Chen replied with a slight smile. "We have a talent for refining simple principles into elegant solutions." Torres moved on to demonstrate rounds designed for different scenarios. Subsonic ammunition for stealth operations, specialized rounds for extreme environments, and even non-lethal options that could still penetrate shields to deliver their payload. "The real advantage," Santos explained to the increasingly interested Astrian scientists, "is adaptability. Your energy weapons are incredibly advanced, but they're limited by their fundamental nature. Our projectile weapons can be adapted to almost any situation with just a change of ammunition." One of the younger Astrian technicians raised a hand, their patterns showing what might have been embarrassment. "Could you explain how you solved the accuracy issues? Our historical records suggest projectile weapons were highly inaccurate. Computer-assisted targeting, refined ballistics, and centuries of metallurgical improvements." Torres replied, pleased by the genuine interest. "Would you like to try?" The testing range fell silent at his offer. Admiral Kyra's patterns rippled with surprise, but she nodded her approval. The young technician stepped forward, accepting the rifle with careful reverence. "Stance like this," Torres demonstrated. "Sight picture through here. Breathe naturally and squeeze. Don't pull the trigger." The shot rang out, and a moment later, the target showed a hit. Not perfect, but respectable for a first attempt. The technician's patterns shifted to what could only be described as delight. General Chen watched as more Astrians began asking to try the human weapons, their earlier disdain forgotten in the face of demonstrable results. Sometimes, she reflected, the best way to change minds was to let people discover the truth for themselves. The sun climbed higher in the desert sky as the demonstration moved to the long-range testing area. Here, targets stretched out to the horizon, barely visible through the heat shimmer rising from the red earth. Master Sergeant Wu's artillery crew stood ready beside their weapons, while the Astrians prepared what looked like elegant crystalline spires. "Our precision strike system," Admiral Kira explained, her patterns showing pride, "capable of delivering pinpoint energy strikes at extreme range." The Astrian weapon hummed to life, its crystal structure resonating with barely contained power. A beam of coherent energy lanced out, striking the first target at 1 kilometer with devastating accuracy. The reinforced plate didn't just break, it vaporized. "Impressive," General Chen acknowledged. "Would you demonstrate the maximum effective range?" The Admiral gestured to her weapons team. The crystal spire adjusted, targeting a plate 3 kilometers distant. This time, when the beam fired, something unexpected happened. The energy dispersed noticeably, spreading out in the atmosphere. When it reached the target, the impact was significantly reduced. Atmospheric interference, Lieutenant Santos observed quietly. Their energy weapons are losing coherence over distance. The Austrian technical team huddled around their equipment, making rapid adjustments. Their next shot at 4 kilometers showed even more degradation, the beam spreading into a diffuse glow that barely marked the target. "Perhaps a demonstration of your systems," Admiral Kira suggested, her patterns showing what might have been embarrassment. Master Sergeant Wu stepped forward, her expression professional, but with a hint of satisfaction. "Standard artillery piece," she explained, gesturing to what appeared to be a relatively simple weapon. Nothing exotic, just well-engineered ballistics. The gun elevated slightly, and Wu's crew moved with practiced precision. The first round thundered out, arcing high into the sky. Seconds later, the target at 4 kilometers erupted in a precise explosion. "But that's not a straight line," one of the Austrian technicians protested. "How can you achieve accuracy with such an indirect approach?" "Sometimes the straight path isn't the best one," Wu explained, already adjusting for the next shot. "We use the planet's gravity, account for wind and atmospheric conditions, and let physics do the work." The next demonstration showcased different artillery rounds, high explosive, armor-piercing, guided munitions that could adjust their trajectory in flight. Each shot found its mark with devastating accuracy, regardless of distance or conditions. The real advantage, Santos explained to the increasingly interested Austrians, is that ballistic trajectories actually become more efficient at longer ranges. While energy weapons fight against atmospheric diffusion, our shells work with natural forces. Admiral Kira watched as another round demonstrated this principle, her patterns showing deep thought. "We assumed direct energy weapons were the pinnacle of advancement, but you've taken a different path entirely. Humanity has always been good at working with what we have," Chen replied. "We didn't have energy weapons, so we perfected what we did have." Wu's team continued the demonstration, showing how their artillery could engage multiple targets simultaneously, deliver different payloads to achieve various effects, and maintain accuracy even in adverse conditions. The Austrians' data collectors worked continuously, recording every aspect of the seemingly simple but devastatingly effective weapons. "There's an elegance to it," one of the senior Austrian scientists admitted, watching another shell arc perfectly to its target, using natural forces rather than trying to overcome them. As the demonstration continued, Lieutenant Santos noticed something interesting in the Austrians' reactions. They had stopped making notes about the weapons themselves and started paying more attention to the principles behind them. Perhaps, she thought, they were finally beginning to understand that advancement didn't always mean increasing complexity. The next round of tests would move to even more challenging conditions, and Wu's team was already preparing specialized ammunition. The Austrians, their earlier confidence somewhat shaken, watched with newfound respect as the human crew worked with quiet efficiency. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, bringing with them the distinctive red-brown haze of an approaching desert storm. Several of the Austrian technicians began powering down their equipment, clearly expecting the demonstrations to pause. They looked up in surprise when General Chen's voice carried across the testing ground. "Weather conditions are optimal for our next phase," she announced, drawing confused looks from the alien delegation. "If you're willing, Admiral, we'd like to demonstrate operations in adverse conditions." Admiral Kaira's skin patterns shifted through several uncertain colors before settling. "Our energy weapons are not designed for use in particulate-heavy atmospheres. The interference would make them unpredictable." "Exactly," Lieutenant Santos said, stepping forward with her monitoring equipment. "Every environment presents challenges. The question is how we adapt to them." The storm rolled in with characteristic Australian fury, bringing stinging sand and howling winds. The Australians' crystalline technology dimmed in the harsh conditions, their elegant designs suddenly seeming fragile against nature's raw power. Colonel Bradley emerged from a nearby shelter, leading a team equipped with what looked like remarkably ordinary rifles. Their gear was weathered, practical, and completely unfazed by the surrounding chaos. Standard desert operation loadout, Bradley explained over the wind. We've learned to work with environmental conditions rather than fighting against them. To demonstrate, his team took up positions against the storm. Their weapons had been subtly modified, protected against sand infiltration, adjusted for wind compensation, but fundamentally unchanged from their basic design. "Observe," Bradley called out, gesturing to a series of targets barely visible through the storm. His team opened fire, and even through the howling wind, the impacts were clearly visible. Every shot found its mark. "How?" one of the Austrian scientists demanded, their patterns showing disbelief. "The atmospheric interference should make targeting impossible." Santos pulled up a display showing the ballistic calculations. "We're using the wind, not fighting it. The calculations are complex, but the principles are simple. Velocity, mass, air resistance, drift. Things we've understood for centuries." Admiral Kiura watched as Bradley's team continued their demonstration, moving through various combat scenarios with practiced ease. The storm seemed to have no effect on their accuracy or efficiency. "Your weapons," she observed, patterns showing dawning understanding. "They remain consistent regardless of conditions." "Simplicity has its advantages," Chen replied. "No energy signatures to disrupt, no complex fields to maintain. Just refined mechanical principles that work in any environment." The demonstration continued as the storm intensified. Bradley's team showed how their weapons could be quickly maintained in the field, how different ammunition types could be used to counter specific environmental challenges, and how their basic reliability remained unchanged even in the harshest conditions. "It's not just the weapons," Santos explained to the increasingly thoughtful Austrian scientists. "It's the whole approach. We design for the worst conditions, not the best. Everything has to work when nothing else does." One of the younger Austrian technicians, still clutching their deactivated energy weapon, asked hesitantly, "Could you show us how you protect the internal mechanisms from sand infiltration?" Bradley smiled, proceeding to demonstrate the simple but effective sealing systems. The Austrians gathered around, their earlier disdain forgotten as they studied solutions their advanced technology had never considered. As the storm began to ease, Admiral Kiura approached General Chen. "We may have been too quick to dismiss technologies we considered obsolete," she admitted, her patterns showing humility. "There are clearly advantages we had not considered." Chen nodded, watching as human and alien technical teams began exchanging notes and ideas. Sometimes looking backward helps us move forward. "Shall we continue with the night operations demonstration once the storm passes?" The Admiral's patterns shifted to show keen interest. "There's more. There's always more to learn," Chen replied, "especially when we're willing to question our assumptions." Darkness settled over the testing grounds, bringing with it a profound silence after the day's storm. The desert night revealed a canvas of stars, their light competing with the subtle glow emanating from the Austrian equipment. Lieutenant Santos noticed how their supposedly stealth-equipped weapons still produced a faint luminescence, beautiful but decidedly visible. "Night operations require special considerations," Colonel Bradley explained, his voice calm in the darkness, "especially when dealing with detection and concealment." The Austrian demonstration team went first, showcasing their night-fighting capabilities. Their weapons produced spectacular displays of controlled energy, each shot lighting up the range like a miniature dawn. The accuracy was impressive, but Santos' instruments detected the energy signatures from over 3 kilometers away. "An interesting approach," General Chen commented diplomatically. "Would you like to see ours?" Admiral Kiura's pattern showed curiosity, though muted in the darkness. "Your weapons don't seem to have any illumination systems." "That's intentional," Bradley replied. He turned to his team, who had positioned themselves at various points across the range. "Begin demonstration." For several moments, nothing seemed to happen. The Astrians shifted uncomfortably in the silence. Then targets began falling, one after another, with only the slightest whisper of sound. No muzzle flashes, no visible trajectories, just the impact of rounds finding their marks in the darkness. "How are they targeting without visual guidance?" one of the Astrian technicians asked, their patterns showing confusion. Santos brought up a display showing various wavelengths of light. "Multiple spectrum targeting," she explained. "Infrared, thermal imaging, atmospheric detection. But most importantly, no energy signature to give away position." Bradley's team continued their demonstration, moving through the darkness with practiced ease. Their weapons, using specialized subsonic ammunition and advanced suppressors, remained nearly silent. The only evidence of their operation was the consistent impact of rounds on target. "Watch this," Bradley said, directing attention to a distant hillside. A sniper team had positioned themselves there hours earlier. Through advanced optical systems, they engaged targets at extreme range without any visible trace of their location. "Remarkable," Admiral Kira admitted, her patterns showing deep interest. "Your weapons are completely passive. They emit nothing that could reveal their position. Sometimes the absence of signal is more powerful than its presence," Santos explained. "Your energy weapons are incredibly advanced, but they're inherently visible. You can't fire a beam of energy without some form of detection signature." The demonstration continued with increasingly complex scenarios. Bradley's team showed how their weapons could adapt to various night fighting conditions, urban environments, adverse weather, electronic warfare environments. Each time, the simple mechanical operation of their weapons proved advantageous. "The real breakthrough," Santos explained to the fascinated Astrian scientists, "was realizing we didn't need to make our weapons more powerful. We needed to make them more precise, more controlled, and most importantly, more discreet." One of the Astrian weapons specialists stepped forward, their patterns showing what might have been embarrassment. "We've spent centuries trying to perfect energy containment in our weapons, yet you've achieved superior stealth capability by simply not having energy to contain." "Different paths to the same goal," Chen replied. "Your technology is remarkable, but sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective." As the night demonstration concluded, Admiral Kira approached the human leadership team. Her patterns had shifted to a deep, thoughtful configuration that none of them had seen before. "We came here expecting to demonstrate our superiority," she admitted. "Instead, we find ourselves reevaluating many of our basic assumptions about warfare and technology." Bradley nodded in the darkness. "The best weapons aren't always the most advanced. They're the ones that work when you need them, exactly how you need them to work." The night air carried the soft sound of agreement from both human and alien observers, a moment of shared understanding beneath the desert stars. Dawn painted the desert sky in shades of purple and gold as the final day of demonstrations began. The testing ground showed signs of the previous day's activities. Impact marks on targets, tracks in the sand, and a noticeable mix of human and Astrian equipment working side by side. General Chen found Admiral Kira already at the command center, her patterns showing a mix of colors that suggested deep contemplation. The alien leader was studying footage from the previous demonstrations, paying particular attention to the simplest aspects of human weapon design. "Your people have achieved something remarkable," the Admiral said without turning, "though perhaps not in the way we initially assumed." Chen joined her at the display. "How so?" "We believed advancement meant increasing complexity, adding more features, more power, more control systems." Kira's patterns shifted to a thoughtful blue. "But you took a different path. You stripped away everything unnecessary until only the essential remained." Lieutenant Santos arrived with her final analysis, rows of data showing the comparative strengths and weaknesses of both weapon systems. The results painted an interesting picture. Each technology had its place, its purpose, its optimal use case. Look at this, Santos pointed to a particular dataset. Your energy weapons are unmatched for pure destructive power. Our projectile weapons excel in reliability and adaptability. They're not opposing technologies. They're complementary. The morning's demonstration reflected this new understanding. Human and Astrian teams worked together, combining their approaches in ways neither side had considered before. Energy shields were modified to work in conjunction with physical armor. Targeting systems shared data across both platforms. Even the ammunition was being redesigned to incorporate elements of both technologies. Simple doesn't mean primitive, Colonel Bradley explained to a group of Astrian weapons specialists. It means refined, perfected. Everything unnecessary removed until only what matters remains. The Astrian technical team had set up a joint research station, their advanced sensors analyzing the mechanical precision of human weapons, while human engineers studied the elegant efficiency of Astrian energy systems. The exchange of ideas flowed freely, each side recognizing the value in the other's approach. "We came here expecting to teach," Admiral Kier admitted to Chen as they watched the collaboration unfold. "Instead, we learned something far more valuable. There is no single path to advancement. The universe is vast," Chen replied. "There's room for many kinds of progress." As the sun climbed higher, the teams gathered for one final demonstration. This time, it wasn't about competition or comparison. Human and Astrian weapons worked in concert, each covering the other's weaknesses, amplifying their strengths. The result was more effective than either technology alone. Perhaps, Santos suggested, reviewing the final data, this was the real breakthrough. Not proving one system superior, but understanding how different approaches can work together. The Admiral's patterns shifted to a color they hadn't seen before, one that seemed to reflect both pride and humility. "We will need to revise much of what we thought we knew about technological advancement, and about Earth's readiness to join the galactic community." Chen smiled. "We may not have the most advanced technology, but we understand how to use what we have. Sometimes, that's more important than raw capability." As the demonstration teams began packing their equipment, human and Astrian personnel exchanged not just technical data but stories, experiences, and new perspectives. The initial mockery had transformed into mutual respect, born of understanding that true advancement comes in many forms. "General Chen," Admiral Kiera said as their ships prepared for departure, her patterns showing sincere respect, "We came seeking to evaluate Earth's defenses. We leave having found allies. And teachers, there will always be a place for Earth in the galactic community." Chen watched the crystalline ships rise into the morning sky, their hulls refracting sunlight just as they had on that first day. But now they departed not as superior beings, but as equals who had learned that sometimes the simplest solutions were the most profound.